Hello and welcome to episode 108 of On My Studio Table. I'm so happy to be here with you as I am every week. I know it's a lot of work to put a video together, but I enjoy it very much and I hope you enjoy what I've put together for this week. I'm covering a few different things, of course some stitching and some jelly printing. We've also started on the second half of the year for the Words 2026 project. So even though there are 53 weeks this year, there are only 52 Saturdays. So we're doing 52 weeks of one word per week. The exciting news is that the art shed has begun. I'll show you a little bit about that in a few minutes. We've got a little window of sunshine in the midst of very cloudy weather and quite a lot of rain. And we've noticed that the wattle blossoms are starting to bloom. So I just wanted to show you that. It's just such a lovely early sign that spring is around the corner. It's been quite dismal lately and it can be quite depressing. I'm not one of those people that tends to react to the weather in that way, but it is so nice to see the sunshine again. So I'll just come closer to this little clump of trees, trying not to fall over because the ground's a bit uneven. And here we are. These little tiny fluffy yellow balls. And to give you a sense of scale, I'll just put my hand near it and you can see that they are very, very small. But when all these buds open, it will actually be glowing with golden colour. Absolutely beautiful. I've shared this in previous years as well. If I look further around to the east, you can see the trees which are near the creek on the next property, and also Mount Elephant shrouded in mist. That's our electricity supply going through our land there, and it services a couple of other households as well. And then when I turn, I'm looking now towards where the art shed will be, just behind that big wattle tree there. That is so exciting. I can't tell you how excited I am. It's been a long, long process. Taken so much paperwork and quite a bit of angst really. So it's lovely to see things having begun, and I'll show you that too. I just got a bit distracted because one of my polyanthus is in bloom in this hanging basket. If I move the camera, I'm at the eastern end of the house. You can see that we have piles of firewood which Ian is processing, covered up with tarps because of the rain, our water tank which is half of our house water supply, and then if I go towards this direction, the wood will actually be put into a woodshed which we still have to build, so it won't be lying around near the art shed like this. But you can see that there are many extra stakes put up to show you the boundaries of the art shed. Ken, who is working with Ian to build it, has brought out his laser level and has measured it all out, ready for the foundations. So this is a very exciting development that we can now see what's actually happening with the art shed. You can see it's in a beautiful spot and the view will be in this direction, and I'm standing near where the front door will be. If I look around here, you'll see the other trees. The builders just arrived to start for the day, which is great. So as I said, a very exciting time, and we're quite close to the house as well. And I'll keep you updated as to what's happening as it progresses. This basket won't fit under the camera even when I zoom out, so I'm going to dismantle it and show you. These are my preparations for the project with Catherine Chambers of Catherine Cloth Tales. One of the things that she suggested was to gather together your materials and put them into some kind of container so that you don't feel overwhelmed with too many choices. And I thought that was such a great idea that I went ahead and did it straight away. So that's my pile of fabrics and a few spare papers that I might or might not use. This tin, which is a lovely old vintage tin that belonged to Ian's mother actually, holds all my tea bags. So there are 3 different types of tea bags. They've all been dried, emptied and ironed. Then I've also got the eco-printed papers that I did a few weeks ago. I'm going to use some of these in the final project. And the project is actually a stitch journal. The signatures are ready, except that I'm going to incorporate some of the eco-printed papers and maybe some cloth as well. These are rusted and tea-dyed, rust printed and tea-dyed, various papers, mostly art papers, envelopes, mailing envelopes, used ones, some sketchbook paper, and a little bit of brown paper bag. I'm really looking forward to starting to assemble this and starting to work in the journal. I took part in a couple of Catherine's projects before when we did stitch journal throughout the year. We did a whole series once a week, and I made 2 journals out of that. So if you go back through my earlier videos from last year, it was in 2024 actually, so year before last. How time flies. So if you go back through my videos, there's a playlist, you'll see some of the things that I did for those journals. But I'm so looking forward to this, and I think it will be just a lovely project to be participating in. The other thing we needed to do to prepare was things like found objects and threads. I'll just show you the threads first. This is an old tin, which I think also belonged to Ian's mother, and it held Dundee shortbread originally, but it just fitted my pearl cottons and some other threads in here beautifully. I'm going to mainly use pearl cottons, I think. I've also selected some wool threads for couching, and this one is a stranded cotton, but I think that's the only one. That doesn't mean that they're the only threads that I'll use, but they're my starting point. Then with the found objects, I've got quite a few different bits and pieces. These might not be the only things that I use, but this is again a starting point. One of the things I love to use is the insides of broken clothes pegs. So I've got a few of those just for shape really and contrast. And I found an old buckle. This is a flower shaped bit that I think might have come off some jewellery. That's a little charm of a spool of thread. This one is a bit like a paper fastener, but it's got a decorative top on it, and it's got a thread and needle. I don't know if you can see that, it's very, very tiny. This one has some flowers and dragonflies on it. This is a clock face, and I really love the vintage look of that. A key, I love keys. That's from some old lingerie. Another clock face. Some of these came in a little packet that was gifted to me by one of my followers, I think as part of the Red for Courage project, just for something as a treat for me, which was so lovely. And so I'm going to use them in this stitch journal project. One of the things I've been really looking forward to is to be able to jelly print on cloth so that it's wash fast and able to be stitched, because as you know, stitching is one of my passions. And I have been successful in using the right medium to mix with the earth pigments to make it permanent on cloth. This is a beautifully fine cotton cloth that I've used here, and I jelly printed with my earth paints using the base of a glass tumbler to make patterns in the background and strips of masks, as they're called, which I made out of an old postal envelope. And then I used another mask cut out of paper based on this drawing. This is a drawing that I did in a board book that I altered some years ago, and we're preparing for an exhibition called Birdsong in a group that meets here once a month, called Stitching and Beyond. So this is one of the things that I'm making for it. And what I did was I photocopied this and I cut out the bird shape and used that as a mask also when I was jelly printing. A mask means it just masks off some of the paint on the surface of the jelly plate so that you get a shape, which is how we got these hills and valleys kind of appearance in the background, but also to get the bird shape. It wasn't very distinct, so I did outline them with Inktense pencils before I did the stitching, so I knew where to go. And then I heat set it with the iron before I started the stitching, which makes it colour fast. And there's a little bit of shadowing behind the stitching from the Inktense, which I really like. It's very subtle, but I just thought that added something to it. Not all of them turned out as well as I would like. These are probably the best two, so I'll just show you the second one. This one is quite a bit paler, using similar colours but with the introduction of some orange, and the purple is actually a bit lighter than it was in the previous one as well. And because the mask sometimes moves a bit or paint shifts around under the edge of the mask, sometimes the shapes vary a little bit. So I went with that, and you can see the shape of the bird's head is slightly different and the body and the wings. But I like that variation. Even though they're a series, there is a variation in between each one, including with the thread choices. I use the same stitches and the same idea of stitching, the same types of stitching, but I changed the colours. And this one, I would say, is a more subtle pastel kind of version, whereas this one is a very earthy version. So what I've done is I've also gone through my stash of fabrics, and I collect quite a lot of fabrics that I find in charity shops and so on. I keep them in a special bin, and I go to them when I need something for, say, cushion covers or the backings of quilts or whatever. These are ones that I've had for ages. This one is a faux suede, so it's got a lovely soft velvety kind of finish to it, like suede leather, but it's actually got a bonded back and it's a cloth that's easy to stitch into. I thought this would be a good base colour for these two stitched jelly prints. I'll just put them there. So that's one of the colours that I've chosen, and that will be used for both of them. I'll just zoom you out a little bit. So I've chosen this one to go with this jelly print, and because this one is more pastel, I've got this for that. And I think combined with this colour, they will look really good. They're earthy, but they're not too brown or dark. And I thought these accentuated the colours that I've used in the jelly prints and in the threads. Then for the cushion backs, I needed another fabric, and I need quite a bit of it because that's what these are going to be. These are going to become cushion covers, and they're going to go into the exhibition. So it's just to show that art can be utilitarian and part of your decor as well. It doesn't have to be hung on a wall. So I have this drill fabric, quite a big piece of it, which I also found somewhere ages and ages ago. These two I did buy from a friend who used to have a quilting shop, but this and this all come from places where I've found them, most likely charity shops. So that's the plan. These will become cushion covers, and I'm going to make them quite large, probably the 18-inch size. One of the jelly printing artists that I've found on YouTube is called Jackie Bernardi. I would advise you to look her up. She has some fabulous ideas for what to do, not only in the jelly printing process, but also how to use your papers. She's a mixed media artist, so she also incorporates painting and drawing quite often with the jelly prints. One of the things that she suggested was to mask off a square. She did larger squares than this, but I went with the size that matched my jelly plate, and then I used masking tape to actually mask it off. You can buy a special artist tape, but I didn't have any of that. And I thought, how will I get it off if I stick it on and it might tear the paper or tear the edge of the jelly print. But she had a really good tip. She said to make sure that it comes off without leaving any residue or taking paper with it, you need to use a hairdryer and just give it some heat and it softens the glue and it pulls off. And I did that and it worked really well. I did it for 2 of them. But then I was up early the next morning and I wanted to do the rest of them. And I didn't really want to make a lot of noise because I was the only one up. So I thought maybe if I use an iron. So I used an iron on the back before I took the tape off, and that worked a treat. I had a couple of places where I did catch a bit of paper, but I think it was because I was trying to do it too quickly. So I slowed myself right down, and then I was very successful. Mostly, if the paper did come off, it was near the edge, thankfully. So I'll just show you, this is a series of 8 in 2 parts, and I just love how they turned out. I used a bit of metallic pigment powder. I have some gold mica, some copper mica, and some silver mica, and I've used both gold and copper in these, and I did them in 2 layers. I've cut templates, which are really masks also, from the same postal envelope that I used for the stitched cloth that I showed you, and it works really well. It's a little bit floppy, but it does work really well, and I've used them several times. I also used bubble wrap, and you might not see it so much in this one, but I used also some corrugated cardboard, and as I said, I did it in 2 layers, and I really am very happy, especially with these first 4. They're all different, but they're all continuous, so I'm showing you them in the order that I did them. I alternated between ultramarine purple and ultramarine blue, and also gold or copper mica, and I introduced some orange into this one. There's a bit of green in that one, which is the Terra Verte one, but the theme is continuous, especially because of the shapes and the metallic. So I really, really like that, and I'm just trying to decide now whether I stitch into these or not. Because we've got the birdsong exhibition coming up, I've been thinking about my wetlands book, which I made from collaged and stitched papers, eco-printed papers as well as found papers, and I did ghostly images of birds on the pages to represent the birds that are either extinct or in danger of becoming extinct, when they will only become a memory or a ghost of what was. And I still have the templates that I made for that, so I'm possibly going to stitch just a silhouette of the birds that I did in the Wetlands journal. So we'll just see. I'm still thinking about that, whether I want to do that or not, but I think it could work really well. I did it in a cream cotton, and it should look really good against those colours. The second set that I did, I introduced some green. So I've still got the metallics. I've got some orange there. I've introduced also some burnt sienna and the emerald green, and I really like what's happened there. In this one in the background, I did my lovely stamp that looks a bit like the sun, and also some corrugated cardboard, and then I did these masks or templates on top in the second layer. I also did a kind of reverse template or stencil type of thing, where I cut holes in a piece of that same large envelope and used that so that the holes printed rather than the outlines. And that had an interesting effect too. I only did 1 in this set and 1 in this other set, which I think I have here. Yes, here it is. So that's another one that I did with the same stencil kind of approach. The sun stamp and the corrugated cardboard. This one, you can't see them quite so much. There's the corrugated cardboard there. Here is a stencil that has little circles in it, which is one that I love to use. And the same with this one. This one I introduced some of the blue again because I had some left on the jelly plate and I didn't want to waste it. And talking about not wanting to waste it, just to clean the jelly plate, I mixed all the colours that were left on my palette onto the jelly plate, just roughly mixed it with my roller, with my brayer, and this is the result that I got, and I really love it. So I can see that this would be a really good contrast with some other jelly prints for collage. And then I did another one with the last little bit of paint. Unfortunately, it did tear a little bit because it was starting to get too dry, but there's still a very usable section there. So that's a great way to make sure that you don't waste any of your paints. And yeah, just a really interesting process. I'm very, very happy with these. I think these could be standalone artworks, and they could be perhaps framed or mounted just as they are. But as I said, I'm thinking about maybe stitching the bird shapes onto them. In my last video, I mentioned that I had made some accordion books, and I have since made a fourth one. This was the one that was the subject of the tutorial, but I also did 2 other books which I shared in previous videos. I've also written some poetry to go with them and done some simple collage and stitch on them. So that one is the one I shared in detail last time, called When Dusk Falls. This one is the latest one. And again, I used some of my jelly prints, and I did actually collage some of these shapes as well, because I had some that had printed, but this was just the background and it looked a bit uninteresting. So I actually cut a piece out of some leftovers of this one and collaged that on and then stitched it. So I've done a similar technique for all of these. This one I've called Silver Lining because there's quite a lot of silver metallic pigment in this one, in some of the prints, as you'll see as I go along. And it's talking about the idea of a silver lining, but sometimes we can't see it. And then when you go to the back, you can continue looking at the book, and it finishes like that. It's just something that's been part of this series. There's been a similar theme about loss and grief, hope and despair, but also joy. And I think that was partly because I was remembering my dad, and I did a little tribute to him at the end of last week's video. He died in 2011, aged in his 80s, and I still miss him, even though it's been a long time now since he's been gone. So I just shared a little tribute. He would have been 100 on the 14th of June. So he's been in my mind. He was also very artistic and encouraged us to be creative. So that's why there's a kind of a bittersweet element to the themes, the artwork and the poetry in these accordion books. But as I said last time, it's part of the cycle of life. We go through all these things. Sometimes we have this facade of everything being fine and we're happy and things are going well, when actually underneath the surface we have had some hurdles and difficulties to deal with, and we don't talk about them. So I've tried to be honest with you, as I am today, about missing my dad, so that you'll know that you're not alone. We're all human beings. We all have feelings. We all have things we have to deal with. One of the ways we can express it is through artwork. And it doesn't matter how mundane it is, how it looks to other people. It's a way for us to express how we feel, and it validates our vulnerabilities. Just to conclude, I would like to read you the poem that I wrote and show you the little collages that go with them. Silver Lining. They told her there would be a silver lining, but the clouds of grief stood dense and dark. She closed her eyes against their lowering, until one day she opened them and saw. As I mentioned, we started the second half of the year for Words 2026. So my folder is now complete with the first 26 weeks. As I'm using the squares to make blocks for my 3-panelled wall hanging, which will be a giant wall hanging, I'm replacing the actual stitching with photographs of the squares. As you can see, there are a few that I haven't done yet. I needed to do a second folder. I shared a little while ago that I found one secondhand recently at our local tip shop, which is at our recycling centre and rubbish dump. So that's becoming my second Words 2026 folder or journal. I didn't have very many of the original fabrics left. I have none of this butterfly fabric left, for example, but I do have some of this and some of the fabrics that came in the same pack as that. So I've used this again just to give continuity, but I've also added new fabrics which still tone in but are not the same, so that they still look like part of a series but are individual entities as well. And of course I had to include some naturally dyed fabrics as I did in the other one. This is all pinned together, ready to go, and I have started stitching, as you can see just here, and that's a very enjoyable process as always. There will be little flaps inside to hold the folder together, and I've put weekly project July to December, and then we come to the first one for this part of the year. This is my aroma square. That was the word that I pulled out of the pot last week. And aroma, of course, is quite a nebulous thing. It's our sense of smell in action. And aroma is often associated with pleasant smells. So that's what I've gone with. This is representing the aroma that comes when I get breakfast ready. I have quite a simple breakfast. I'm not very hungry first thing in the morning. So I have just toast and tea. And that's represented by the tea bags here and by the shape of the square, which is my toast. Then I thought, how can I include some of the other aromas that I really, really enjoy? And I thought about peppermint tea, which I have in the evening. And so the green here refers to peppermint tea and also to the outdoors. I don't know if you've noticed, but if you're outside in the country without any exhaust fumes and other polluting kind of aromas or smells, the air just smells so fresh and sweet, and I just wanted to represent that in some way. The bread tag here represents the toast as well, of course, and here we have the inside of a clothes peg. What does the clothes peg have to do with aroma? Well, if you don't use a dryer and you hang your clothes outside in the fresh air and your sheets and towels and so on, they just smell so fresh when you bring them in. I just love the smell of fresh laundry that's been dried outside. I've used some hand-dyed silk chiffon, which I got from the Thread Studio, some wool for couching, and then a combination of pearl cotton and stranded embroidery thread. The stitches are a couched straight stitch, some detached chain, a little bit of seed stitch, French knots, a straight stitch for couching, straight stitches to attach the found objects. Let's find out what the word is for week 28. I have no recollection of writing this one at all, so it's just as much a surprise to me as to you. Neutral. Well, that could be just a matter of choosing neutral colours for your cloth. I can't really think of another meaning, but it would be worth maybe doing a mind map for this, as we did earlier in the year, or looking it up in a thesaurus or a dictionary. So This is a challenge for you for week 28.